On the way to the meeting here, I was traveling with my 13-year-old son. I don't know whether he's there in the audience, but he asked me a question, and I hope to be able to answer that through the course of this next 20-minute speech. The question he asked me is, do governments lie? And I was stumped by that question, frankly. I do not know what context he asked that question. But then here I have a situation where I have to answer whether do governments lie? The next question he asked me is, if someone lies, does somebody take them to the court? I don't want to answer the second part of the question, but I will try and attempt in the next 15 minutes on some aspects of what the government is saying and what is happening on the ground. First, a perspective. Since 1991, India has gone on the path of liberalization and globalization. And what does it mean? It means that we have opened up our borders, both the financial borders and the tariff borders, whatever it is. We have integrated more into the world economy, and we have also increased the depth of our own economy. The point I now want to make is this, that successive governments, whether it is Congress, whether it is NTA, whether it is UPA, and whether it is NDA now, whatever their politics is, their economics is broadly the same. This budget reflects a fine point of that economics. It may not reflect the politics of what we like or what we don't like, but it reflects a fine point of that economics. The question to be answered is, the long potential of India having a growth potential of 8 to 10%, is this budget achieving a step forward to that direction? For a long time, we believed that 8 to 10% was possible. And then we softened the target and we said that it could be between 6.5 to 7. This year, we are discussing 7.5 to 7.75. When we say that our economy can grow at the rate of 8 to 10%, there are many things which we have to do right to make that happen. Has this government made those changes to make that happen in the longer term is what we need to discover, especially in this budget. This budget continues many of the things which UPA has done. Manrega is one. The Mahatma Gandhi National Guarantee Rural Employment Scheme this year received 38,500 crores. So that is the scheme which the previous government introduced, which this government is continuing. But they have made an important change, an important thrust in that scheme. I will come to that a little later. So when we're talking about this budget, we also have to see what this budget in the previous 2 years, what this country in the previous 2 years has inherited. We have inherited a slowing down of the global economy. And that is continuing, and nobody is exactly sure as to whether this will reverse in the next 2-3 years. But there are, there are green shoots, as the American would say. The US economy is growing, and the US economy is a large economy. They're growing at 2%. The second thing which the government has inherited this year, for which it has to react, is the slowing down of the Chinese economy. The Chinese economy for 30 years was almost having a double-digit growth. So when we say China this year is growing at 8%, we are saying that China is slowing down. But that 8% is not very different from the 7.75 where we are. and 8% is not a small number. China is continuing to say in their longer term projections that they will grow between 8 to 10%. They have not changed that number. But can we believe China? Can we believe their numbers? Can we believe our own numbers? And why do I ask this question? We have heard in many forums in the last 6 months or a year that our exports are coming down. We have heard that the index of industrial production is down. We have had 2 successive droughts or other monsoon failures. We have had a reduction in oil prices. But all indicators show that we are not exactly in a great place as far as our economy is concerned. The boost which we thought the Modi government will give to the confidence to spur private investment has not really happened. Given that situation, can we believe that this 7.5%, 7.75% of GDP growth is a real number? If you read the fine print in the economic survey, and I think this economic survey must take credit of being one of the finest documents on the state of our economy and finest document produced by the Ministry of Economic Affairs on the economic survey in the last 20 years where we have all been tracking. It's a terrific document and I recommend each one of you should read it. It makes, even if you are not an economics guy, you're just interested in the state of the country's finances, volume 1 of the economic survey makes terrific reading. And this economic survey says that in spite of all these indices being lower, the domestic demand is still strong. And that will spur growth, and they are bang on target on that. The exports have been plummeting, and those numbers are not very exciting. But having said that, on numbers itself, because oil prices have come down, India exports a fair amount of oil by refining it, especially in Reliance in Jamnagar. And those physical exports are still the same, but the value of the exports have come down. Given that, if you exclude the petroleum, oil and lubricants, POL exports, the remaining exports have shown a fall of only 6%. Which is not a small fall, but it is still not a bad number to be considering what's happening in the rest of the world. In spite of 2 successive years of drought, the overall food production has remained wherever it was in the last 1 year. And that is encouraging. The survey says that maybe El Nino is finally weakening. And if it weakens, he refers to another phenomenon called the La Nino, where the warmer currents will bring monsoon, especially to the Indian subcontinent. It may or may not come this season, but definitely what it says is that we can speculate that there would be a better monsoon this year. Given these circumstances, I think that it's a good chance that our economy will continue to grow at 7.5%. But there is something which happened on the oil front. India consumes almost about 4 to 5% of the global oil production. USA, China are 2 very large oil consumers. And this year, India continues to import around about 223 million metric tons of oil. That number has not changed. What has changed is the price you pay for the oil has changed. And that is a bonus for this government. That bonus is what this government has fully utilized to rectify the balance sheets of many oil producing companies like HPCL, BPCL. Actually, the price of petrol and diesel should have come down by almost 40%. They have come down only by 15 to 20% for the simple reason that government continues to collect higher excise duty from all of us on petrol and oil and rectify or sort of clean up the balance sheets of these petroleum companies. They are almost there. Another 6 months of soft oil prices up to $40, these companies would have redeemed all the oil bonds which they had issued in the last 6 years to fund their losses. And that is a bonus for this country. This country is talking about something else also. They said that this is the time to build the strategic oil reserves. India is targeting, India's strategic oil reserves is a fraction of what United States or China has. United States has a capacity of 779 million tons. India is about 35. But correctly, what India is doing is, they are building up huge storage tanks to take advantage of these falling oil prices. And that, I think, is the right thing to do. Because when else would you store oil which does not deteriorate on storage when the prices are low? And this is the time when they are building huge capacities. You must have read in the newspaper about the offer of UAE. They said that if you store our oil, then 2/3 of the oil, we will take 1/3 of the oil is free. Because they want to continue pumping. And when they want to continue pumping oil, they are keeping their factories busy, their refineries busy. It is also good news for us because our remittances can keep coming. In the last 1 year, when the global economy is weakening, Saudi continues to produce oil. Iran is a new entrant. Iraq continues to pump. Kuwait continues to pump. The entire UAE continues to pump at almost the same levels as what they did last year. What does it mean for India? What it means is our remittances stream do not stop. Even if the oil has come down from $100 at a peak or $120 at a peak to where it is now at $35, the remittances in India from the large migrant workers we have there have not come down. And that, I think, is good news. The next piece of good news is that we continue to import gold. We don't seem to be having a limit on the desire to import gold. There is a temporary drop of last year at about 680 tons, but otherwise our imports of gold have really consumed our current account deficit. Last year, in the current year going, we have already imported 800 tons and we expect it to cross about 1,000 tons. The government, in a failed scheme, and this scheme has failed, I must agree, that they have said that this gold is a wasted asset, and they started a national gold bond scheme, and that scheme fetched them about 800 kgs of gold. We are talking about 800 tons of gold being imported, and India has reserves of almost about 10 times as much. Government has failed to understand that gold is not just a financial asset. Gold is a reserve asset, especially for the poor. But an interesting aspect of this survey is they have examined in detail the use of subsidies for the rich. And they have said that nearly 100,000 crores of subsidy are actually given to the rich and not to the poor. And that analysis is a brilliant analysis. I remember having said it last year and the year before also at the same forum that the biggest beneficiary of the LPG subsidies are the middle class. Government has, in a very interesting scheme, said that maybe people should voluntarily give up this subsidy. And that voluntary giving up also has received a very good response from many of us. But what this subsidy analysis has done is, one of the analysis it has done is that even on gold we receive a subsidy. On Provident Fund we receive a subsidy. So, and kerosene, the kerosene mostly goes to the poor. But on LPG we get a subsidy. On food we get a subsidy. And this subsidy is undeserving because we can afford it. So it is time that all of us, and especially the government, has a fresh look at these subsidies. The surprise factor is, having said that, in the economic survey, the government has done nothing on withdrawing those subsidies in the budget. Maybe in the year to come or in 2 years to come, they'll take some action. But definitely, this budget has done something very interesting, and I must refer to that here. Their thrust on the farm and agricultural sector. They are maybe 3 years late or 4 years late, but it's never too late. The budget, if it has a theme, and that is why I think this budget is a very good budget, that it has a theme. This year's theme is that they want to support agriculture and the farm sector. 60,000 crores have been given for groundwater support. The village roads have been supported. The rural, all villages, that's a scheme which is continuing, but the village electrification is being supported. There is also a rhetorical statement, which I don't think it is possible, but it also says by 2022, in 5 years' time, our farm incomes will double. This is the gap in the Indian budgetary planning, which deserved to be filled in the last 5 to 7 years of our history of budgets. This is the gap which is needed to be filled urgently, but we have already delayed by 5 years, but like I said, it's never too late. That the central government has said that there must be thrust to agriculture, to put money into rural employment, to support Manrega, and Manrega again is being supported for a theme of supporting groundwater, and I think that that's an excellent approach of the government to have a theme and to concentrate on that. Hopefully we'll be next year, and hopefully the next year's budget will continue this trend, because things such as in agriculture don't change overnight. Though the government has a rhetoric of saying make in India, I think they made a politically right statement, because elections are coming. Money has to be put into the voters, and the best way to put money into the voters is to support agriculture. So politically also it's a smart move. But whether it is a smart move politically or not, it's a right thing to do, because this constituency has been ignored for too long. And I think that we must give full credit to the finance minister and to their thinking that they have finally recognized this gap which needed to be filled. The last two things which I would like to say before we finish is that this government has also recognized the problem of exit. India has a problem of exit. We don't let go of failed businesses. And this inability of our business community and of our own government and of the regulators to let go of the businesses, to let go of wasted capital, would mean that we are being inefficient. The survey talks about this problem as a Chakravyuha problem, that you can enter but you cannot exit. And I think that what the government must do is to pursue the bankruptcy code which they had introduced in the parliament, to make sure that exit happens in a time-defined manner, to make sure that even if there are political costs, those costs have to be borne if capital has to be efficient. This inability to deal with the labor problem when you close down a unit actually hurts both the labor and the capital, because that labor can be used usefully elsewhere. The remarkable thing is that we thought that this problem was largely a public sector affair, where there are many public sector units which continue to produce, which continue to support their labor even if they are not inefficient, Air India being an example. But that's not true. There's a large component of private sector employment and private sector investment which continue though it is inefficient. Government must urgently address the exit problem. There has been in the last 15 years a national consensus on education. It is time that along with the consensus on education, there should be a consensus on health too. Supporting initiatives which reduce infant mortality are urgently needed. We all claim to be talking about the huge demographic dividend which we have, where we say that we have a large number of young working forces. But if that force is not healthy, they are not going to be working very long. We are going to invest in keeping them healthy. You would rather invest when they are keeping them healthy when they are children, when they are young, so that they can come into being a strong, robust young person. India doesn't invest enough in its health. Unfortunately, in the way our polity is constructed, health is a concurrent subject, and it works partly with center but mostly at the state. What this government has recognized is that is a gap. There is another gap. What the budget has done in this gap is nothing. But I think that the consciousness of needing to of support what the survey calls the mother and child health has started. We hope, like how the country has built its own education, and the finance minister in a brush of the hand says that the universalization of elementary education is complete, and now we are talking about higher and secondary education. I come back to my theme in the beginning of this speech. Actually, it's a lie. It's not true that 100% of our children are all in schools. But he said it. There are many doubts which have been raised on a variety of figures of GDP by various economists. But the government is persisting with those numbers. We don't know what is a lie and what is true. But we know one thing for sure, that in this budget, there's a marked change because there is a thrust for a particular area, that is in the farm and agricultural sector. Rural infrastructure has been recognized, and that's a great welcome move. I will only end this speech by answering the last part of the what is called the balance sheet problem. The problem of the banks, weak banks. You must have all heard of this problem. That many banks have started reporting losses, and these losses have actually been incurred by the banks earlier, and there are huge NPAs built by the banks, and these banks need to recognize these NPAs in their balance sheet, and if it is not done, global confidence in our financial institutions will come down. And it has been the theme of this governor of Reserve Bank of India that you can't brush it away under the carpet. We can't get into a situation where, like China, where it is believed nearly 40 to 50% of the state-run banks are actually illiquid or are under, and their reporting of their balance sheets are untrue. But being a democratic and reliable nation as we are, we didn't want anyone to have credibility on our balance sheets, question the credibility of our balance sheet. Many corporate balance sheets, when you talk about the twin balance sheet problem, we are talking also about the corporate balance sheets which people are doubting. Finally, you would have seen a trend in the last 2 quarters where banks are beginning to write down their assets, disclosing losses, and asking for more capital. The budget has provided 25,000 crores of capital to these banks. They have also said that if more money is needed, it is available. A solution which people are discussing is, why should only the government invest? Reserve Bank has $350 billion of reserves outside the country. They can always get $10 billion into the country and invest in these banks, because these are the banks in any case the RBI is regulating. There may be a conflict of interest, but it's a good idea. The Reserve Bank of India has been, I wouldn't say at loggerheads, has been at variant opinions with the Government of India. This budget provides for the Monetary Policy Committee, where a fair amount of work which is earlier done by Reserve Bank of India has now been shifted to the Monetary Policy Committee. It's a question of politics. And now we will not know when the monetary policy is being determined. Is it being determined by experts sitting in RBI, or it is being determined by bureaucrats and groups of people with political interest, and we will not know who's telling the truth. Having said that, it's a great budget to work with. Thank you.